Everybody reviewed the summary of actions for the October meeting?
We haven't got a quorum, we can't pass it.
No, but everyone's read it. Well, we can just, the attendance log look okay to everyone? Well, let's just jump right into major discussion items. Distribution of the final Measure J calendar year 2016-17 Growth Management Program compliance checklist for the fiscal years 18 and 19 local street maintenance and improvement LSM funds.
We make you work by writing the longest agenda blurbs possible. So that's.
Well, it just gives us lots of room to flub it up.
Yeah, the chair of the planning committee read that one last week and about how to fit. As you know, we completed our checklist cycle. Well, not in July. I think we saw the last checklist. Yeah, in July. Or sorry, in August. I forget which month it was. They were due by July 1st. So I think we saw the last ones in July. That closed the last cycle of growth management program checklists. And now it's time to get ready for next year's. The next cycle starts April 1st. That's when cities in the county can start submitting their checklists so they can get their return to source funds. For those of you who are new here, the checklist is how our cities get their voter-approved 18% return to source from Measure J. 18% of the entire measure goes back to the cities for use in local streets and roads maintenance. And in order to do that, they must submit this checklist that says they meet these 12 requirements, and they must demonstrate through the checklist that they are meeting these requirements. So we take the checklist through the committees at the end of the year and then distribute it in January or February, and then the cities can start submitting, as I mentioned, in April, and then funds are available starting at the beginning of the fiscal year, which starts July 1st. Generally, we start making payments around August 1st. And usually the county submits April 1st so they can get their money. You'll notice we talked about putting some hard and fast requirements on when people could submit and how many could submit at one time. We were kind of shot down on requiring people to submit at a certain time. I'm going to keep addressing that in the future. But what we did get in the board letter was to limit the amount of checklists in any one CAC meeting to 3. So what we're going to do is basically the first 3 jurisdictions to submit their checklist in a given month will get to go to that next month's CAC meeting, and then anybody else will be bumped to the next month. So if like we had last year, about 9 or 10, are we okay over there? Submit all in the last 2 months. Basically, it's going to cause things to, pile up, and they'll have to present their checklists in September or maybe October. So it's as liaisons to the cities, I would, if you talk to city staff at all or council members, I would really encourage them to get their staff working on the checklists earlier. They have over a year to submit, and so many wait till the last minute. We're just banking that money. It's just sitting there. And these cities could be using it to pave your local streets, to fix your potholes, to keep, cars from breaking down, to keep bikes from popping tires, to keep, the buses running smoothly. Everybody relies on those streets being well-maintained. So I think that's something, you guys could really impress upon city staffs, is that this money is waiting for them, and some of them are just sitting on it, or we're sitting on it for over a year while they're waiting to submit their checklist. So that's my advice to you guys, and because it affects you, because you live in those cities where those funds could be expended on a more timely basis. So that's my editorial for the night. I might have some more, but so the checklist is really unchanged from last year. You might remember, if you were around last time, we added item 12, which was the submittal of the local streets and roads maintenance reporting and audit forms, and that's where they have to detail exactly how they spent the money. It could be the number of potholes filled. It could be the square footage of pavement rehabbed. It could be the square footage of sidewalks installed, the number of ADA compliant curb cuts, all these things that are, permissible expenditures under Measure J. They're now having to detail how they're spending the money. So I think we'll be bringing those reports to you in the coming months, so you can see exactly, you see them individually, but we've compiled all those reports together, so you can see really how the money is being spent countywide. So that, we didn't add any new items this time around. We did go through and make some clarifications to the instructions and provide a little more, better instructions, so we don't get as many questions from the cities. But really, it's unchanged from last year, and what we're really hoping for this year is timelier submittal of checklists, so we can give the cities their money sooner, and we aren't having a big log jam in, that would be July of 2019. When at the end of the checklist season. So I'm not going to go through all the items today. What I've started doing at the beginning of checklist season is doing a checklist primer, where we kind of, especially for new folks, I kind of go through a checklist and say, this is what you should be looking for when you're reviewing it. This is what is important about each item, and this is why you should be scrutinizing some items more and some items not as much. So we'll do that next spring. But today we just wanted to run the checklist by you, see if you had any questions, see if you had any comments before we send it out to the jurisdictions in sometime in January.
Madam Chair, comment, please. So, thank you, Matt. So a couple of things regarding the checklist. We had looked at putting cities together in regions, and that didn't go, because that would have been so easy. I mean, you could have had 5 in one meeting and done if
Right.
they were all in the same region, if they were all the same region. So, okay, I like the fact that we're limited into 3, because otherwise people wait to the last minute. Is there any chance that you can give us a list of the cities that wait until the last minute, so that if in fact we are representing them, we can call city clerk and their planning department and ask them to, or the engineer, planning engineer?
I'd love to do that. We do have repeat offenders,
Right.
so I'll go through the last few cycles and see who those are.
Yeah, because it's too much. I mean, by the time we get to number 3, I don't care what you've done, get me out of here. So, and that's not fair to the citizens. I think that's a good idea. Actually, I think it's a great idea. That checklist primer, especially for our new members, to look at that and see specifically what are we looking at, and what are the different questions, and perhaps maybe what have been the standard responses to those in the past. I know I keep asking about public transportation and housing we just get the standard response. I'd rather get a more accurate reading on what's going on in the city. So yeah, I know Lafayette submits theirs on time, so I don't need to contact my city clerk. But I would just recommend those who have not submitted or their city has not submitted theirs on time to contact the city clerk. Probably is the better person, and they can just sort of like prod them. And the money, as you said, the money is there. Take it. It just sits there. So.
And the cities aren't getting the interest. So.
And I was just going to say that. And they don't get the interest. So what's up? And I do understand that there are some cities that have new employees and or only have one person in that particular department who puts together the report. So just look at what was done the year before and, go from there.
And we work directly with them.
Right.
I'll hold their hand through the process if they're new, especially if they're new. So.
Right, and just let them know that, Matt will do that, and Matt will know what questions we're going to ask, so, we can prime them. It's not really us they need to be so concerned about as when they get in front of the Board of Supervisors. So, by that time, they've gone through it 3 times, so they're pretty seasoned. So thank you for your report. I appreciate it.
Steve?
I'm just wondering, it's not so much for this current checklist, if this MTC initiative to link transportation and housing takes hold, I would assume that that's going to probably influence the design of the checklist at a future cycle.
Yes, yes, definitely. We're not sure what that's going to look like. They've tabled that till the next STIP cycle, the state transportation dollars. That just in case you haven't heard. So there's the STIP fund, which is the State Transportation Improvement Program, which basically funds construction of capital projects on the state highway system. They are trying to link local housing production to the funding of projects. And so, for example, we have STIP dollars in the I-680 State Route 4 interchange improvement project, which, has been, we've been cobbling together funds for 20 years for that. And we're finally getting close. And then MTC, says because the city of Concord, and just because the city of Concord touches that project, that those STIP funds wouldn't go to that project because Concord hasn't met its, affordable housing minimum requirements set by the state. But that isn't necessarily a Concord project. It's a Central County project that affects East County, it affects West County, this affects Solano County, so that was kind of our pushback on that. We understand the importance of, housing production, especially affordable housing production, but we don't think that an entire region should be left out to dry for the, issues that one city has. And Concord, is going to produce a lot of affordable housing once things get going at the Naval Weapons Station. So they'll probably, backfill all their past years of not doing it. It's their responsibility, but we just didn't see, that like I said, an entire region should suffer for one city. So we'll see where that goes. They've tabled it for the current STIP cycle and are going to revisit it in the next STIP cycle. So, yeah.
Matt, following up on what Jolie and Stephen were talking about, I'm just wondering if it would be possible when the invitation goes out to actually have city staff members present the checklist. If it could be not just the city engineer or the public works director, but if, for example, a planning director or economic development director from the city could also be invited. Because I know that on those occasions when we get more than one representative from a city, we're usually much better able to get answers to the questions we have. So I know maybe that can't be made mandatory, but I'd just like to see if that could be strongly recommended, that a city have more than just, a public works or engineer who can address the transportation issues only, but to address some of the other issues that are related.
That's a really good suggestion, because I see the same thing happen, especially if you've got, kind of either the public works side and the planning side covered, or the planning and the economic development, you've really got most of the issues covered. So I certainly can't require it, but I do talk to the staff each time before they come in, and I can definitely make that suggestion to them and try and get that trend started. There are some cities that do it normally, but there are a lot that don't. Especially if it's a new staff member, they should probably have someone else with them.
Well, the other thing we can do is when we look and we see that, for example, a city that we represent is coming up on the checklist, we can apply a little pressure, persuasion to the city clerk or, whoever to, have the two representatives there instead of just the one.
And especially if it's a city that has a lot of, say, housing issues or a lot of economic development issues, it'd really be helpful to have that person attend. Yeah, I like that idea, so I'll follow up on that.
I don't want to beat this to death. Sometimes we have representatives who are seasoned, and they just show up along because I've done this so many times before. So I like us to address that group too, that yes, you've done it so many times before, and we still would like to invite.
Definitely. And I just want, and one thing that you guys can do, I know you only have maybe a week, advance notice on what checklists are in the agenda, but if you open up the checklist and see something and you have a question about it, let us know, because we'll let them know that, the committee has questions about this certain item, and then we can suggest that they bring in an expert on that item, something like that. So if anytime you guys have questions in advance, let us know, and we'll make sure they come prepared to answer.
Yeah, and I certainly support the idea on this issue, because so many of the questions are about housing and economic development rather than transportation.
Yep, the checklist does not just cover transportation.
So we can, I think, at least in Oakley, we can get a copy of the checklist directly from the city manager. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I can do that, and I can review it, and I can find out all kinds of stuff. The other thing I was wondering about this STIP funding, would that offset other transportation authorities' expenses and allow more money, return to source money, to go to the cities for other projects?
The money wouldn't go back to return to source. It goes to other projects, other Measure J projects. So when we get STIP money for one Measure J project, we then transfer the Measure J money to another project, usually in the same subregion, but not always. But yeah, we keep it in the project category.
Anybody else? Carry on, Matt.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys are going to be tired of me pretty soon, if you aren't already. Next item is, what is it? It's the ULL item. Let me find it. Oh, there we go. So this is the approval to issue the annual Urban Limit Line Policy Advisory Letter. This kind of goes along with the growth management. Well, it does go along with the GMP checklist. And can you turn on the projector? Just for reference, this is a map of the urban limit line for the county. The red outline with the kind of shaded interior is what's in the urban limit line. The urban limit line is a requirement under Measure J. It's a requirement on the GMP checklist that each city has either approved their own version of the urban limit line or approved the county's. Most cities just adopt the county's urban limit line, but some cities do their own. And you can see it's mostly contiguous. There are some pockets over there in East County. One is Discovery Bay, one is Little Byron there, and the furthest south is the Byron Airport. And so, those are the areas where cities have pledged they will keep their growth within those boundaries. The tie to transportation is that the taxpayers have funded these transportation projects, this infrastructure that exists, as well as sewer, all kinds of other infrastructure, water, and that new development should not be built far away from the existing infrastructure that just creates more cost to the cities and special agencies to support that growth. So every year we issue a letter to city managers, to the mayor. We copy the city managers, reminding them that they need to maintain an urban limit line, and their cities are allowed small amendments to the urban limit line, but there's a lot of caveats tied to that. Everything has to be under 30 acres. Generally, what we get are like 1 or 2 acre amendments, and we just had one this month, planning committee meeting. It was the city of Martinez, where they had a landowner. For some reason, the urban limit line, I don't know if I can zoom in here and see it, but it created kind of a peninsula where part of the landowner's property was within the urban limit line and part was without, and all it did was just kind of redraw. You can't really see the detail here. See that line right there? There's actually parcels between those lines, and most of it is one gentleman's parcel, and his house is in the urban limit line, but all his property is outside, and it's undevelopable. There's only one. He can build an accessory dwelling unit, but it's not subdividable or anything like that. It was just to get his entire property within the city. So those are the types of things we see. We haven't had anybody try and pass a 30-acre, amendment, anything like that. And when people do, we generally issue a letter that says, you may be in conflict with the growth management program. You should, think about this a little more. So it really does keep cities honest and keeps them compact and keeps their costs down, keeps them efficient. Cities have identified where they want to grow. Growing cities like Brentwood, they've pretty much drawn the line around their planned development. So there shouldn't be a great need to expand in any cities. So this is the letter we issue. We usually send it out in January, and we include the language from Measure J and everything they have to adhere to. So it's kind of a formality because, like I said, most cities do not touch their urban limit line, but it's just a reminder of what they need to do if they do want to amend their urban limit line. So I can take any questions on that.
My only comment is that Brentwood may be developing an extension and taking it to the voters really to rationalize some of the city boundaries.
And, there are some...
That would be it would be nothing like that one that we had the horrible fight over a few years ago, Measure F.
Yeah. So we've heard that Brentwood may, consider stuff, but it will go, if it's over 30 acres, it will go to the voters to approve. But before it can do that, there have to be some, what we call some, I think, bright line conditions where it needs to meet, it can't just be because the developer wants it there. There have to be some real issues that must be in place for them to even approach a 30-acre plus amendment.
Well, we have one very serious issue. I don't know if it shows on your map that on the west side of Brentwood along Balfour Road, that little funny pie-shaped thing, it was intended that that road that only goes halfway around that half circle would actually proceed all the way around and re-meet Balfour Road. And we've got a high school and a grade school along that road, and it's just a nightmare at pickup and drop-off and pickup times. And so that's the kind of thing that they would want to try to resolve, plus some jagged edge boundaries, probably on the north and east sides. But they're well aware of the requirements.
Right.
And I might point out for the members of the committee who may not know that had Measure X passed, the requirements on urban limit line extensions would have been tightened somewhat. I think there was like a once every 5-year requirement, and the county would be limited to 3, as I remember, in total, and an additional finding that would have been required. But since the measure failed, we're still operating under the Measure J rules.
Yeah, and if we do broach a new measure in the future, I think you'll see even more potential tightening of that. The Greenbelt Alliance, Save Mount Diablo, among others, are really pushing for tightening of the urban limit line rules.
Does anybody have a projection into the future, how much of those areas inside the urban limit line are going to be filled up? In other words, how long before do they expect before they're going to have to extend those urban limit lines?
So the county does, I forget how often they do it, but they prepare an analysis of the urban limit line. And that might be an interesting presentation for you guys, have county staff come in and give that. But I believe they've identified enough sites within the urban limit line for the projected growth in the county. I believe that's what the last report said. It came out about 6 months ago.
Yeah, but for what period of time?
I believe they looked out 25. I think the forecast was 2040. So I think they looked out 25 years.
It's not that far away.
It's not that far away. And I don't remember the exact number, but I think there was excess sites, but I'd have to take a look at that report.
Because just in Oakley alone, we're growing between 2 and 2.5% a year. And I think that number is probably even bigger now.
So my question on that is if they've projected out to 2040, so they will then raise the limit on the height of the structures.
That's basically how cities can still add population.
But what I'm looking at is some of the advertisement to come out to live in La Miranda. I'm getting really tired of the commercials. Open space, that's not going to happen. And we're going to, I'm not saying that we're going to look like Singapore, but we're going there.
that is the trend around, especially around transit stations, is to densify. That's how the cities are like I said, adding to their stock.
Any more questions?
Okay, this next item is you guys know about the growth management program. We also have a congestion management program. It's required by the state for congestion management agencies such as ourselves to prepare a congestion management program. It's a document that contains lots of different requirements. One requirement is to every other year monitor your transportation system. And the transportation, I'll get into it in a second, and the type of monitoring that's required is level of service monitoring. And level of service is basically how roadways or intersections perform on a scale from A to F, with A being, well, I'll get into that here in just a second. So here's a little information about the legislation. Every other year, we monitor the level of service standards on the network, and we've assigned a standard to each location. Basically, when the network was adopted back in 1991, that's when the CMP legislation was passed. All the cities got together and decided on these locations that would be monitored. We looked at how they were operating at the time. Say an intersection at the time was operating at LOS A, the standard would probably be put at somewhere around B or C, so it would be allowed to degrade slightly but not too much. In locations that that had terrible congestion back in 1991, basically, they either were given a standard of E or F, so they basically were allowed to stay bad, because once an intersection is degraded or is that busy, it's hard to really unbusy it. And there are some ramifications if locations fall below their standard. So for the last 25 years or so, we've had these level of service standards. The network is comprised of all of our state-maintained freeways, all of our major arterials, and basically the rules for that is that the road is 4 lanes or wider for at least a mile. The ADT, which is average daily traffic, is greater than 20,000. And just for reference, Treat Boulevard here is 60,000. Probably the busiest street in the entire county, for that matter. And the roadway must be designated by the regional transportation planning committees as a route of regional significance. So the CMP network is basically a subsection of the routes of regional significance. The performance, the intersections are defined by, the intersections that we monitor are determined if it's considered a major intersection on the network, if it's an intersection of 2 of these actual CMP routes, that includes the ramps, the freeway ramps, or just any other location on the network where no data was available for adjacent jurisdictions, so we don't have major gaps in our monitoring of the system. So the dots on this map are the intersections. There's 65 of them, and then there's 95 miles of freeway, and we subdivide that into 23 segments so they make more sense when you're looking at the performance. What we do is every other spring we go out and collect the data. basically, we hire firms to go out and do it. In the past, you've seen those hoses that go across the roads. That was the traditional way of doing it. That isn't done as much anymore. It's considered old school. Now, the other old school method was at intersections is actually having someone out sitting there and with a little board where they're counting every car and the direction it's going, whether it's going straight, right, or left. Now, generally what they do is they mount cameras on a pole at the intersection. It videotapes the intersection for a day or two, and then they go back into a room somewhere and do the counting, but not out in, rainy weather. Well, it can't be rainy weather, but the cold, or it's dangerous out there also, especially when they're on freeway, at the foot of freeway ramps. So basically we have requirements on when this is done. They can only collect data on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Mondays and Fridays are off days. No public holidays. If there's a major incident, like a big rig crashes on 24, then no counts anywhere in the vicinity. If there's a project under construction, we don't count when that's going on, and we exclude any time where any schools are out on spring break. If East County schools are on break, then we will still count West County, but if any of the junior colleges or the major universities are out, then we don't count. And you'd be amazed at how much traffic just one school like Diablo Valley College adds to a lot of freeways in the county. It really affects it. So as I mentioned, at intersections, we do automated and manual counting. And now there are actually cameras that do the counting for you. So you mount those cameras, and that's the MyoVision I've got in the parentheses there. The cameras actually do the counting, but then there's staff people that go in and review, just for quality control. And since 2011, we've included bicycle and pedestrian counts at all intersections. So we've now got kind of a trend for and a historical count of bike and ped counts at all these 65 intersections. So that was just kind of something that we could include, something extra we can get out of these intersection counts that we weren't getting before for no real additional cost. So the biking community and the cities appreciate that because they can use it in their planning. In the freeways, we use, if you've ever heard of big data, we use big data, and it's from a company called INRIX, and basically they use Bluetooth signals, vehicle fleets, the detection system that's built into the freeways that Caltrans maintains. They basically use a combination of all this data that they're capturing through the cell towers or Bluetooth beacons, and also from Caltrans, and they turn all that data into speeds, and then can compute a level of service score from that speed. So that's been another way we're able to save data, is that we're using this commercially available data and aren't having to sit people on freeway overpasses or doing tachometer runs, which is basically people driving down the freeway and measuring the speed, and they have to do it over and over and over again to get an average speed. So it's a whole new world for monitoring these days. So just want to show you what traffic has done between 2013 and 2017, basically kind of when the end of the recession to now. And the blue line there is employment. So you'll see that since the recession has ended in Alameda and Contra Costa County, employment has just been gangbusters. The one downside of low unemployment is you get traffic that follows the trend line almost exactly. So the red dotted line is delay on the freeways. basically anytime traffic is moving at less than 35 miles an hour for 15 minutes or more at a time. So what you consider a backup. So you can see they match each other almost exactly. So the longer we're in a good economy, the more you're going to see traffic. When the recession hit, traffic went down. So it's kind of a byproduct of a good economy. But I just wanted to show how those two track each other. So when you complain about the traffic, you're also complaining about the economy. But not really. Okay, so here's a kind of a snapshot of all of our freeways in Contra Costa and how they're doing. The level of service is that grade at the bottom, A through F. And over there in the legend on the right, you can see on the freeway how those scores equate. Basically, F is any time you're going under 30 miles an hour. A is basically free flow. And B through D are B through E are just steps in between. And you can see that actually the majority of our freeways, this is during the peak periods, are performing pretty well. But we do have 95 miles of freeways. I think all the locations that are over there on the F. We're sitting right by some of them. There's some on Highway 4 and then a bunch over on I-80, but everybody else is kind of somewhere in the middle. I think most people can live with a B, C, D, but it's the E and F that really get people complaining. But you can see it's really not a whole lot of the freeway system in the county that's at E or F, but it is enough that people notice, and it's at the same places every day. And if you commute those places, you feel it. So for those 23 segments, actually 21 of them in the AM are meeting their standards, and 2 of them aren't. In the PM, 20 of them are meeting their standards, 3 are not. Generally, the standard is around an E. So we'll look at a few particular corridors that didn't meet the standards. State Route 24 in the morning, westbound, starting at 680 to, through Lafayette. I don't have I have an extra 2 there, I guess. So it's 680 to Oak Hill Road. That exceeded the standard in our last monitoring period. It showed up again. I-580, most people go, 580 isn't in Contra Costa, but 580 is the approach to the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge, basically all in the city of Richmond. That is a new one. There used to be very little backup at the toll plaza there in the mornings. Starting a year or 2 ago, we saw it go from, maybe a half-mile backup, pretty minimal, to about a 3 or 4 mile backup. And now every morning, it is backed up through most of the city of Richmond. We're actually there's potentially a toll bridge, a new toll that will be on the ballot next year called Regional Measure 3, and we've lobbied for a project in that measure, if passed, that would try and address the Richmond Bridge approach. It could include adding HOV lanes there. It could include removal of the toll plaza so that you have, like you have on the 680 of the Benicia Martinez Bridge, where there's no toll booths. It's called open road tolling, where people don't have to slow down. They just drive right through with their fast track. So it could be something like that, but it's going to take kind of a creative approach to solve that problem.
Matt? Question. I'm not aware of huge job growth in Marin. Do you think this is people are merely going that way and then taking the Golden Gate Bridge into the city? to avoid the Bay Bridge, or what do you think?
We think it's a combination of two things. One, people using it as an alternative to the Bay Bridge. They go Richmond, San Rafael, and then Golden Gate into the city. But it's also, we think, because of the high cost of living in Marin, and so many people have been priced out that have jobs there, and to fill the jobs in Marin. A lot of the jobs in Marin are low-paying jobs, and so the residents are coming from places like Solano County and West Contra Costa, and it's just it's product of. Exactly. Both those routes are ways of getting into from the more affordable areas to the less affordable areas, but also a way to get to San Francisco. Now, if we could only get Marin to build more housing, but we know that's probably not going to happen. So State Route 4 in the PM, AM has improved a lot since the widening of Highway 4, but in the PM eastbound, you're really seeing a backup from 242 extending west across the 680 interchange and going all the way back to Morello. So it just kind of getting through the 680 interchange to 242 is a lot of people are stuck there, and that did show up back in 2015 and is still there. And we have a project there at the interchange to hopefully address that, to add a third lane with a HOV lane through that section that should hopefully alleviate some of that problem.
Some of the problem, I think, also is you're talking eastbound?
Yes.
PM? Is the neck down and weaving as 242 and Port Chicago Highway come in.
That is the...
And you've got you've got 5 or 6 lanes of traffic that you have to neck down to 4.
Right.
And a lot of people are doing the weaving motion from 242 to get over to the HOV lane.
Yeah, that is kind of the factor that's causing the initial backup that's cascading west.
And that starts around 2:30. I've gotten stuck on that several times. And just at about 2:30, I can get, but you've got people who, that bottleneck is getting off at Pacheco and then getting onto 680 and then 242 coming onto 4. So you've got a lot of weaving back and forth, and then the roads are just getting narrower and narrower.
Yep. We're going to try and address some of those issues. First, we have to identify them, and then we can start developing, mitigations or projects to try and mitigate some of the issues. So another new one for this time was Highway 24, eastbound PM, Alameda County line, not just to Pleasant Hill, this is the Alameda County line to Camino Pablo. So this is basically coming out of the tunnel and then jamming up right at the Orinda Moraga exit. And it actually goes well into Alameda County. We just report back what's going on in the county, but it is going back almost to the MacArthur Maze there in Oakland.
Is that just sheer volume, or is there an impediment?
It's sheer volume. There's some issues there at the Orinda off ramp. Some weaving, people getting over to exit there. So there are plans for an auxiliary lane between basically the tunnel and that exit that could allow for some storage of cars that are actually exiting to eliminate some of that weave. But we don't know when we'll be able to construct that. But so that's something new we're seeing daily. And then 242 in the PM is also another new backup or new exceedance of the standard. And that starts at Highway 4 where Mr. Smith just mentioned they're all coming, all those lanes are coming together and is basically backing up the entire length of 242 back to 680. It's not affecting 680 really at this point too much. The backup kind of clears up right here at Treat for a couple miles, and then you hit it again at 242. So that's something hopefully we can mitigate up there at where they all come together and with some operational improvements. And this is just showing those new locations circled there. On the left, it's the Richmond-Santa Fe Bridge approach. There on 24, westbound in the morning. And then in the PM, it's that back up to Camino Pablo. And we know it doesn't, it goes all the way to 680, but the 680 to Lafayette area has always been a problem. It's just now going all the way back to Oakland. And there up in the center is the eastbound 4 and the northbound 242. One thing that affects congestion but is also caused by congestion are incidents. So this is an incident heat map, and incidents are basically accidents. Or a car breaking down, a big truck breaking down on the side, something like that. And this is where they happen most often. And you'll see that they happen most often where there's congestion. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? Did an incident cause the congestion, or did the incident occur where people start to slow down in the congestion? And it's probably both. But what we find is that where there is congestion, there are accidents at the back of the congestion where it starts to back up, because you're going 65 and then all of a sudden traffic's going 20, and a lot of people bump fenders in those locations. So they kind of go hand in hand. And that's what if any of you have been or heard about the I-80 Smart Corridor, you got a presentation here about a year ago on that, and where there's the gantries overhead and they tell you to start slowing down, slow to 40, slow to 30. That's really to try and eliminate or alleviate those accidents that occur at the back of the congestion. So people know that they're going to have to slow down from 65 to 20, and they aren't doing it in the span of 100 yards.
Are they having any effect? It doesn't look like it according to that map.
80 congestion is not going to go away. But the incidents, it doesn't look like it. Caltrans does have some statistics. I think they are showing that there has been some improvement in the number of incidents, but the traffic is still bad, so it's hard to notice. But one thing that in the year since the Smart Corridor has gone into place, traffic has also grown. So any benefits you're getting from the reduction in accidents is now being filled in by the extra commuters coming down the line. It's hard to beat. So now the intersections, we monitor those 65 intersections. Out of them, 63 have met the standards in both the AM and PM. One in both the AM and PM has not met that standard, and that in both the AM and PM is the San Pablo Avenue Highway 4 intersection, basically where Highway 4 ends and dumps you onto San Pablo Avenue in Hercules, and then it continues as John Muir Parkway down to the shoreline there. We're actually rechecking that because we don't think that's accurate and that it would be the only one that exceeded its threshold in both the AM and PM. We think there's something wrong, so we are retesting that. You'll see 63 plus 1 does not equal 65. There's 2 locations that we think, or that were counted, the wrong location was counted. So we're recounting those. So it'll hopefully be 65 and 0 by the time we do those rechecks, but we don't know. And basically the level of service, the A through F, different from the freeways. Freeways is based on speed. This is based on the amount of delay. So if you reach an intersection at a red light and it turns green within 10 seconds, that's considered no delay really. So it gets an A. If you're stuck there for a minute and a half, that's an F. And then it, it's, like I mentioned, steps in between. So around the county, you'll see that very few are at F, very few are at A, and most intersections are between B, C, and D. And as I mentioned, these are at the peak period, so this is kind of the worst case, excuse me, with a few at E. So I think if you asked people, most people would say, oh no, the intersection I use is definitely at F, and it's probably at D or E, but it just feels like an F. But if that's your intersection, if you go through it at noon and you know what it feels like at noon, and then you hit it and you wait for a minute, it feels like forever. So,
Well, if you look at the history you've had at that intersection, whereas before there wasn't a delay, and now sort of creeping into delays, and a year later you're thinking, why am I sitting here so long? So
good point. Yeah, you could have been at B forever, and then all of a sudden you slip to C or D, and you're like, what the heck happened here? And then on the right there, we're just showing the percent of intersections between 2015 and 2017. And this is actually showing some improvement in the AM and kind of same old in the PM. And then this is a map that just kind of shows where those are at. You can see that one intersection I mentioned in Hercules, circled on the left there. And I would say the majority of the bad intersections are here in Central County, along Contra Costa Boulevard, along Treat Boulevard, along Ignacio Valley, and Kirker Pass is where, and then roadways kind of adjacent to I-80 in West County. So kind of where the freeways are bad, the local arterials suffer as well. People trying to access those freeways or avoid those freeways.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
When we're looking at monitoring the AM peak periods, have those hours changed due to the fact that people are now telecommuting? So are we still looking at, is it 6 a.m. to 8 a.m.?
Well, technically, yeah, the peak period is, some people consider it a 3-hour peak. Some people, our model considers it a 4-hour peak from 6 to 10 a.m. and then from 3 to 7 p.m. But the peak periods, it used to be 6 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 7. Now it's creeping. We call it the shoulders of the commute. It's creeping to 3 p.m. to 2:30 to 7:30, and in the morning it's going from 5:30 to 9:30 or 10. So, but 6 to 8 and 4 to 6 are the real peaks. So that was the AM there, and this is the PM. Similar trends with those major arterials, especially here in Central County, and then over in West County, really feeling the brunt. So we tried to identify some projects that could address some of these problems. So some near-term improvements we think will have some positive effects are the I-680 southbound HOV completion and express lanes, which are going to be from North Main Street to Livorna on the southbound direction through the 24 interchange. The improvements at the State Route 4 680 interchange, especially Phase 3, which is the first phase that will go forward, which is the addition of a lane in each direction through that really congested area. And then the opening of EBART in East County, which is scheduled for May of next year, we think should have some very positive impacts on the freeway. And even if it doesn't reduce congestion, it will give people an alternative.
Right.
We heard from BART yesterday that, so right now the trip from Antioch to Pittsburgh Bay Point on the eBART system will take 10 and a half minutes. Right now, they gave us the statistics for the the Tri-Delta Transit buses take 30 to 45 minutes to get through that same area. So that's 10 minutes, 45 minutes versus 10 minutes. That's a huge improvement for people.
Let's hope we have enough parking there.
So we think people will, choose it just based on the time
have
savings.
Massive amounts of parking.
That
and-
park and ride at Hillcrest is big.
Yeah, and I did that 300 run a lot, and that makes a huge difference.
Yes. We're going to have some news about that in just a little later in this meeting that you might be interested in. So operational improvements, you just saw this presentation last month, the Innovate 680, where we'd be, placing some different technological and operational components on the highway that we think will have some positive impacts. Also includes the express lanes through there. State Route 4 operational improvements, that's between Port Chicago Highway and Bailey Road, which we think will have some positive impacts. Signal timing on arterials and at intersections, we think could really improve things. And then I mentioned the Regional Measure 3, the toll increase that we think could, if passed, would set aside a chunk of money for the Richmond-Santa Fe Bridge toll improvements. And this is more of a kind of a technical thing, but this is what the monitoring data looks like. These are the count sheets. See all those little arrows? That's an intersection, and the number of cars turning each way, and then at the bottom are the number of bikes and pedestrians. And then over on the right is the level of service calculation sheet. You need to be an engineer to understand it. I gloss over when looking at it, but it's kind of the standard. But the reason I'm putting this here is because we make all of this available to all the cities, so the cities can use this for their own planning efforts, and then they don't have to pay someone to go out and count that intersection for them. So that's it for the CMP monitoring. I will mention that we also have it's called MTSO monitoring, multimodal transportation service objectives. Those are part of the action plans that are done in the subregions. So they're more local level monitoring and not just level of service. There's various different things we monitor, like transit ridership or delay at side streets, like how many signal cycles it takes to get from a side street onto Camino Pablo. So say you live off of Camino Pablo and you have to sit through 3 cycles before you can actually get onto the street. We monitor that type of information. We look at the loading factor on BART, like what percentage of people are standing versus sitting in the La Marinda area. We're now counting all the bike and pedestrians on Iron Horse Trail throughout the county, and looking at safety measures on those trails, and how many bike and pedestrian collisions there are on those trails, so we can kind of identify locations that need safety improvements. So it's a more comprehensive look at kind of the local areas of the county, and not just kind of the freeways and the major intersections. So we'll bring that monitoring to you when it's complete sometime next year. But just wanted to mention that. And I can take any questions.
The big data capture for freeway speeds and even arterial speeds is one of the inputs, the Google GPS reporting, because that appears to be getting better and better all the time. You know, they're always telling me, 2 miles ahead, things are slowing down. They really got that pretty well wired.
Yeah, the different big data providers are generally using the same inputs. So they're all receiving the Caltrans data, and then some of them are supplementing them with different Bluetooth or fleet information, things like that.
I'm also wondering if, maybe not right now, if some of these data capture situations, especially where you're only monitoring for a few hours, would be amenable to drones rather than having to mount fixed cameras.
The authority has just started to use drones in our construction management. Out there at Balfour Road, we're using drones to calculate the amount of earth moved, lots of other things. I forget all the things. Maybe we can get a presentation on that, but they're using drones in their day-to-day processes. You know, it saves a lot of man hours. It's safer. I think there are definitely some uses for monitoring. You could measure the density of the congestion on the freeway. There's lots of different things you could use it for. There are probably some regulatory things on flying drones over freeways, but there's a lot of issues with drones that'll probably be clarified in the next few years. But yeah, if there's options, I'm open to it.
Matt, just one intersection, I'm kind of showing an Orinda bias here, that I noticed was not covered in any of the studies, was the Highway 24 Camino Pablo interchange, which I know is Caltrans controlled. But, I can see there, especially in the evening for the traffic heading eastbound, getting off of 24 to Camino Pablo, you've got not only folks from Orinda and Moraga, but you've got a lot of West County folks who are trying to avoid 80 and turning left on Camino Pablo, heading north to connect to San Pablo Dam Road and head to West County that way. And I can tell you, I understand you said they're looking at maybe putting in an auxiliary lane from either the tunnel or from Wilder down to Camino Pablo, but that is really a problem. And also, even more locally, traffic heading southbound on Camino Pablo trying to turn left at Brookwood, just that short street that goes up to Old Moraga Way. Oh, boy. I'll tell you, in the evening, it can be really horrid because you have folks who are coming out of the Orinda BART lot and then trying to scoot over into that lane to turn left. It's, maybe nothing the county can really observe or control because it is a Caltrans-controlled intersection, but it is, especially in the evening, a very, very congested intersection.
Yeah, I've experienced that one myself. I believe that intersection is part of our MTSO monitoring. We monitor all the intersections on Camino Pablo between, I think, Bear Creek Road and 24. So we'll have some data on that. And then in terms of that ramp, there's a project that goes along with the auxiliary lane that would be an improvement of that ramp and Brookwood Way. So there is a project for that. It's been somewhat controversial because it would take some land next to the ramp, and the neighbors there fought it for a while. So the city was supporting it, then wasn't supporting it, but now they're back to supporting it again. So it has some legs. Sure.
So notwithstanding California is still burning, which is really weird, and looking at Orinda, Moraga, Lafayette, and the likelihood that there would be an emergency that would require an escape route. Has the Transportation Authority worked with the fire districts on looking at emergency routes for not only emergency services vehicles, but for people to escape, and improving that flow, because over there it's really bad?
Generally, we defer to Caltrans on that. They have a category of roads. The name is blanking right now, but it's a category of roadways that serve as evacuation routes or access routes when all other routes are cut off. But the authority has, as part of its studying of the TriLink project that would connect East County and San Joaquin County, we see one of the benefits of that as a true evacuation route, or as a way to get supplies into the region.
So as part of, and I was wondering, they have the affordable housing elements on the compliance checklist, which really isn't a transportation authority requirement, but it seems to me that since all these things are related and interconnected, that we ought to try to get an emergency services routing or something to that effect attached to this, so that we can make sure that in planning for residential areas, we can make sure that there's enough funds available to make sure that we have adequate access and egress for emergency services, as well as for other emergencies.
Right. And I neglected to mention the county, I believe it's the sheriff's department, does have an emergency plan for the county. And actually, last time they updated it, they did contact us. They do have a transportation component to their emergency plan, and they have consulted with us. So that's about as far as we get involved. But we also wouldn't want to duplicate the work they're doing.
Right, but I don't think that they have anything to do with zoning or constructing or building any roadways or doing any projects of that sort. That's my point.
Right.
Is to make sure that, for lack of a better idea, a special lane, I know that sounds a little silly, but just for the fire districts, or some engineering controls that can ameliorate congested intersections in the event of an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, between a year and 2 years ago, I got up during public comment during the authority board, addressing the fact that there are often fairly short segments that will someday be a road, that if they could be constructed more promptly, would greatly facilitate the movement of emergency vehicles. We have several out in my area that we may only be talking about less than a mile of roadway in one case, and between a mile and 2 miles of roadway in the future, after the roadway is completed by a developer to the Brentwood border to link up with Kaiser Hospital out there. There are several areas where it makes a heck of a difference. I mean, in what's been done, my fire district has to shuttle equipment north or east-west a lot, and the improvements of the bypass have made a big difference. and gradually converting some of those at-grade intersections to full on and off ramps with bridges makes a big difference.
I would have to push that one back to the cities in terms of how they prioritize the funding of routes and which ones they want the measure to pay for and which ones they want developers to pay for. But it is an issue.
Well, often it's a situation where one city is ahead of another in getting roads built. The short segment I'm talking about is actually unincorporated area at this point. It's in the Brentwood SOI, but it's not within the city limits.
There's a few I can think of out there.
However, Matt, I do want to expand on what Michael was saying. You go into Burton Valley, drive into Burton Valley, and you see those mountains. Now they're green, thank God. In the summer, they're brown, and it's frightening because I look at that and I think, okay, so let's see. I would just probably walk, if I could, run to Railway Station Road, if I could, and then where? Where am I going to go? So that's, and it's the same thing for Lafayette and Moraga. We're stuck out there. If there's a fire, I think you can say goodbye to half of us. We're not going to get out.
Yeah, I think up in Santa Rosa opened up a lot of eyes about just how vulnerable we are. Fortunately, it's, we're just starting to think about it now. Sorry about that.
No, it's a very real issue. I remember.
Especially.
I remember a couple of years ago, it was a fairly good little fire got going in the Orinda, Moraga area. I remember the commentary of the chief at the time was, my God, the chief of Moraga, Orinda, and he went to multiple alarms and called in all the aerial he could get, and they thought it was a little excessive. But when you think about the difficulty of evacuating people in that particular area, it wasn't so silly.
Well, we had a fire up at Lawrence Berkeley Lab up on Grizzly Peak, and they did just exactly that. They called in everything, and we had to evacuate the lab, and what normally takes 3 or 4 minutes to get off the lab took a half an hour. So, and it's because of poor access and egress to the facility. You got one way in and one way out, and that's it. So, and Moraga and Orinda, they all appear to be the same problem.
Hey, Moraga now has a back door again. Yeah. That is a very small 2-lane road that takes you through the forest.
Matt, just unrelated question, but is it just me? I don't know if you have any statistics, but it seems like every other accident collision you hear about on like KCBS involves a motorcycle. Is it just me, or has there been an increase, or is there a larger percentage of motorcycle-involved collisions?
I actually don't know, but I could find out. We have access to a database and you can, kind of select what modes you're looking at. We don't look at that discreetly, but we certainly can. I would think it would be high, but, or going up.
Any more questions? No? Let's get to something a little happier. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Okay, so members have been asking about having a discussion about the roles of this committee for some time now. You know, the committee's role is defined by Measure J, and I put it here, so I'll just read this. The purpose of the Citizens Advisory Committee is to provide citizen perspective, participation, and involvement in authority policy development and implementation. Pretty generic. There's a big statement under that that kind of expands upon that. The actual, you know, the reason for the committee's formation was to, or one of the main reasons was to look at the growth management program checklist. So, you know, we focus on that most of the year and getting the checklist through. But obviously, when they develop Measure J and define the committee, they thought there was more than just review of checklists, but they didn't spell it out exactly. So we've had ideas, staff has had ideas, without, amending Measure J, what can we do to add to your role, give you guys more responsibility if you want it. We don't, because we probably won't be amending Measure J for this. We want to create opportunities if you're interested. If you're not, that's fine. But we wanted to get the conversation started. We're going to give you some of our ideas, let you submit your ideas. This may be an iterative process where we come back to you and have another discussion in a few months, try and kind of narrow things down or fine-tune things. But we think it's a good idea just to start throwing some ideas out there and see what sticks, see what you guys think is interesting, and we want to hear your ideas as well. So we'll start the conversation tonight. I've got a few bullets I'll go through real quick just to get the ideas going, and we'll see where it goes, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah. So one of the things that I had talked to Matt and Lindsay about was I was noticing that, we come to the meetings, we do take care of the checklist items, and then it's, now what? And there have been certain activities that we've been involved with that I thought were wonderful. We went through the tunnel and got to see the tunnel and input. But at least in the beginning, many of us were very enthusiastic about some of the issues that had come up, and we were stopped at the helm saying that we don't have the authority to go to the authority and say we don't want to approve a particular checklist. We were feeling very uncomfortable about doing that, and maybe perhaps letting that go up maybe another step in having people contact the authority representatives or directors. So, and then what I started seeing was people weren't coming to the meetings. So here we are, we've got the checklist, and sometimes we're here till 10:30 at night, 11 o'clock at night. Thank God we're not going to do that anymore. But I thought that perhaps what we could look at is engaging ourselves as citizens of not only our cities, but also engage with citizens, with representatives of other cities, people who sit here on the committee, find out what's going on in your city, and attend some of the events as perhaps not an authority, but certainly as interested parties that we can bring back and talk about issues, and then have the chair address the full board for the authority on things that that are coming up and we're finding that no one's addressing. For instance, something that's near and dear to me is the bus system. Buses are you see buses, but there's nobody in the buses. And so what's the issue on that? And how do we on our end, raise the conscious level? So Matt and Lindsay, God bless both of them, said, okay, well, let's go ahead, and I guess he talked with Martin and Randy and said, okay, can we go forward with this and see what we can do? And that's what came out of that, is you asking us, what is it that we want to do? How do we want to go forward? And then you can just let us know, that's a good idea, but that's not going to fly, or have you thought of this particular idea? So.
Thank you, Jolie. Jolie mentioned a few items that we've thought about, but I just wanted to throw out a few other things. So here are the items I wanted to run through. Meeting activities, meeting schedule, reporting out to the authority board, and also I think in the authority board also requesting information from you, I think is all, a two-way conversation there, I think is important. I don't know if I have a bullet for that. It just kind of popped into my head. And then participation in CCTA events and activities. So first bullet, proposed meeting activities. One thing we were thinking is that you, the members, you get a checklist presentation, once every 2 years. So once every 2 years, you find out what's going on in Lafayette. But there's stuff going on in Lafayette, outside of that one day every 2 years. So we thought that members, as they find out about relevant, especially transportation issues, it doesn't have to be entirely transportation, but that's usually what concerns show up here, but we're certainly open, especially if there's a connection to transportation. Informing the committee about these issues that are emerging in their cities. So we wouldn't say, Michael, it's your month to do it. It'd be kind of as items come up. We don't want you to have to come up with something, to make up an item. But we think it would add to the agenda if you guys are, talking to city staff, or you're going to meetings and finding out about issues and bringing them back to this committee. So it could be, we could have, one or two a meeting if there's items that you have. It would be a 5 to 10 minute presentation, just like we give, but with questions. Like the second bullet says, it may require you to meet with city staff prior to the report, but I think that's a good idea anyways. You guys are representing your cities, so city staff should be willing to share information with you and tell you what's going on in the cities. And it can also be given in conjunction with the checklists if you wanted to come up with a more formal schedule. And at the meetings, we certainly would continue to bring in speakers on issues that the authority is dealing with, such as the second bullet, new or ongoing plans, projects or initiatives, things we have always provided to you, but we thought we have a monthly legislative item. We have a legislative analyst from Sacramento. We also have one in D.C., bringing those guys in to let you know what's going on. Statewide legislation that's related to transportation, but covers housing and lots of other issues.
I'd love to see legislating representative come talk to us about these issues, especially the affordable housing and the STIP.
They're involved in all kinds of policies and things going on in Sacramento and D.C., so they have plenty of information to share, and Lindsay has offered that up to us to bring our lobbyists in here. So we can certainly do that. Things like the authority budget and policies, we're always, getting reports on on sales tax revenue in the county. It's a very interesting report where, our finance manager gives us a report on where the money is actually coming from. He breaks it down to sector, whether it's coming from automobile sales, gasoline sales, retail sales, fast food. It's all broken down. It's very interesting. I think that would be something that would be interesting for you guys to hear. Our bond sales, how we deal with that. That's how, that's how we build our big projects, because we only get our money as sales tax comes in. But say we have a project like eBart where we need hundreds of millions of dollars all at once. We go to New York and do bond sales. And we have a staff person who deals with that almost exclusively. And I think that would be interesting. So I think there's things going on here at the authority that you guys have been just, in the dark about. And I think bringing those in and giving you guys a full kind of a more breadth of what's going on at the authority would be good, other than just the checklists.
It would be way cool to have a breakdown on how revenue is collected.
Yeah.
Period.
We've got it here. We just haven't been sharing it with you. And we're willing. We always ask you for suggestions for future presentations, but they've been kind of focused on transportation projects. And I think those are always interesting. But expanding upon that, I think.
Is it possible to add things or alter some of the things on the checklist?
You can always suggest it, and when we, because we're in that cycle right now where we're adding or deleting to the checklist. It has to go through a lot of committees, but certainly we're open to. I mean, you guys are the checklist committee, so if you have ideas, we certainly want to hear about it.
Yeah, we for I think it was 2 or 3 cycles, there were 3 of us who sat with you and Martin, and we reviewed the checklist, and we actually changed it. So I think the last change was probably 2 cycles ago. And yeah, you're very open to us changing, and you as the chair can then form an ad hoc committee of members here on the committee who can sit on that, meet with Matt, and revise the checklist based on information that or feedback that you're giving us.
Yeah, we did have that committee. It fell apart a few years ago, but it can certainly be reconvened by the chair, and that might be something to do this spring ahead of the checklists.
Yeah, we don't have enough people right now, and that was another question. How can we get some of the other municipalities to get off the ball and get some people out here?
Yeah, and that's an issue we're dealing with. Some of these cities, you look at, they have a web page that lists all the vacancies on all their different committees, and I mean, it's just like every committee has 5 vacancies.
Yeah, I asked, the interesting thing is that you need Lindsay's permission in order to move forward and with ideas that you have. And I asked her about, why don't we go as representatives, get on the calendar a city council meeting, and just ask them at a city council meeting, not at 11 o'clock at night, because we don't want to burn ourselves out, but maybe hopefully we could be first on the calendar, and just a very brief 10-minute request, letting them know who we are, letting them know that this represents your particular city, letting them know about Measure J funding, and we need someone from your city to sit on the committee. And your name is, you're the chair, and please contact Matt Kelly, and that would be the end of that. And Lindsay was very amenable to that.
Yeah, she developed a little script, and it could also be done, I think she designed it so it could be done during the 2 or 3 minute public comment at the beginning, so you can get in and get out.
10-minute would not fly.
3 minutes is adequate. I know how to do it. But I'd be happy to run around and go do that. I'm unemployed right now, so.
I think you picked us up the San Pablo member, I think, last year.
Well, the reason I said 10 minutes, I mean, it could be 10 minutes or not. It really depends on the city. And if it's a city that has not had a representative sitting on this committee for an extended period of time, I think public comment won't do it. I think that a very 10 minutes goes like that. And you have, Lindsay could put the presentation together, and that's the end of that story. And what you really want to do is raise their conscious level and have them talk about it after the meeting and get back to her. So that's what I meant about, the 10
You got
minutes.
to get them excited about it.
Yep. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, let them know that there's money out there for their community, riding on this, so.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. At a city council meeting, you just don't have the city council members. You've got interested citizens of the community. They're going to hear that and they're going to say, what? No one's been sitting there for the last 5 years? There's your pressure.
No, yeah, and even for Oakley, we have a, what they call it, Leadership Academy thing going, and that's where they recruit a lot of people for all their committees. So I don't know if the other cities have that. I'm sure they've got something going like that, but we could focus on that. I'd be happy to go do that talk.
And I'm going to move on to meeting schedule. So the second bullet we already discussed earlier. I think we're good on, I think everybody agrees that is at least a more manageable way of getting through the checklist season with only 3 per meeting. What we talked about is possibly during what we call the off-season, like now when there aren't checklists, just really only meeting bi-monthly unless there's, and that's kind of how it ends up being. We tend to cancel a meeting if we don't have pressing items, but maybe just make it known that that's what we're doing so you guys can kind of plan around it and so forth. But, we want your time here to be well spent. We don't want you to be, and we don't want you to come all the way here for a 30-minute meeting and, have to turn right back around and, waste your time. So we want to make sure when you come here that there's items that need to be addressed and just make it worth your while. So that's if I'm glad to hear any feedback on that, but I think most people would be okay with something like that. And then as far as the board, so the authority board meets the third Wednesday of every month. For the last, I don't know how many years, we have had a member of this group attending the authority board. He's right in front of me. And he for, I don't know how many years it's been.
Mayor. So I think it would be probably around 2006, 2007.
And that's where you get that monthly report, which didn't make it tonight, but we'll get it to you, on what actually goes on at the authority meetings. They're dealing with lots of the things you hear about here, but they're, making the final decisions on it. So there's some interesting stuff that goes on there. So I think it's important that you guys are tuned in with what's going on, and Stephen has provided that. But maybe there are other people that might be interested in taking on that role. Anytime you're interested in communicating something to the board, we certainly encourage you to come and speak under public comment. Anytime someone comes in and says, I'm a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee, the board members are kind of like, oh. And where we had a lot of that was during the development of the expenditure plan last year for Measure X. Patty Bristow was here fighting for projects in her neck of the woods, and they they really listened to her. I mean, they included her project in the plan, and and I think Chair Dupre was there as well. Someone else was, another CAC member from East County was there. So they really listened, and not that they don't listen to members of the public, but they know you guys are tuned in and are interested in what's going on in the county, and they listen. So I would definitely encourage you to attend a meeting if there's something you're interested in, or if there's something you want to bring to their attention, to come and speak and introduce yourself as a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee. And if it's a kind of a important enough item, we can agendize it. So we want a two-way conversation going between you and the authority, and so both you speaking to the authority and getting a report back from the authority here, and we can always invite in the authority chair to have a conversation with you guys. We're open to anything like that, but we want the authority to know who you are and vice versa. And then last bullet, participation in authority activities and events. We want you to be almost an extension of staff. You know your city better than we do. I want to get a presenter out here on the Concord Naval Weapons Station. I'm going to go through our Concord member, Roseanne Nieto. I'm going to use her to get the Concord people in here, and we've used, Jolie before to get people in here, and others, we think having you as a liaison between you and your city staff is very important. We want you to, if there's a CCTA project that's going before your board, having a member of their city who's also on an authority committee go there and support that project, or talk about issues with that project, or make sure that that project is amenable to the citizens. You're representing the citizens, even if if you want something about the project to change, you think it hasn't been fully thought out. We want you to bring those items to your city with your background as a committee member. We think you can have a lot of sway with your city, and we can let you know when items are going in front of your city. That's something we haven't done before. So if there's items that are appearing on city councils, we can kind of put together a schedule and include that in the agenda packet. We think attending groundbreaking ribbon cutting events for projects in your city or general sub-area, we think that's very important. We haven't done the best job of getting you guys there, but that's something that Lindsay is committed to. For very big items, inviting the full CAC. If it's something going on in Brentwood, maybe we'll invite the East County members. But having you guys there is very important. Our executive director loves to point out when there's staff members there, when there's any sort of committee members there. He loves it, and he will point you out. So he wants you guys there. So we will make more of an effort to invite you guys to events, especially that are going on in your jurisdictions. We want you guys to either volunteer at events that we're throwing, or attend as a guest, like our annual Redefining Mobility Summit that's been held previously in Concord and now in San Ramon. It's our big event of the year where we talk about how we are changing mobility in Contra Costa County. Last year, people got to ride the autonomous shuttle. They got to see demonstrations of all kinds of new technologies. You get to hear from all the people who are doing these things in the transportation field, politicians that are involved in it. It's a really great event, and I'm going to jump 2 slides ahead to show you that it's coming up March 29th. Put it on your calendar, and Lindsay will be making more of a formal invitation to you guys for this event in the spring. So just get it on your calendar. It's at San Ramon. It's a pretty cool event. So back to where we were, and then volunteering. We do not every week or every month, but we occasionally will have a stand at farmers markets around the county. We do Energizer stations at Bike to Work Day. Having you guys, being there and just talking to the public as they stop by, I think would be great. That'd be a good way to recruit for the open positions, and just to share, that we're not just this faceless government agency. We are real people that live in the communities and are, concerned about what's going on in the communities. And so I think the rest of your fellow citizens being able to put a face to this organization, I think, is important. Sure. We can give you nice little pins, and yes, we could do all that kind of stuff. And then just staying informed. We have e-newsletters, we have press releases, we want to make sure you're signed up for that. You can sign yourself up, but we're going to try and make sure you're on all of our e-blasts, so you're getting all the latest news. If you're on social media, if you tweet, if you Instagram, if you post on Facebook, we have all those platforms. You could be tagging us. You could be, sharing, your insights. Anything you post that's transportation related, go ahead and tag CCTA. I think that's a good idea. We have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram pages for some of our projects. So promoting those on your own pages, we think would be great. So those are just some examples. Highway 4 website, the Express Lanes website, and Gomentum Station. So things that you could just easily do when you're doing your social media stuff, we think would be cool to have you guys as part of that. And that was our brainstorming. We'd like to hear if you have any kind of visceral ideas one way or the other, or if you have any ideas that we didn't touch on. We can talk about them now. You can submit it to us via email. We can have a follow-up meeting. It's up to you guys. The floor is yours.
I would like to be able to, it looks like we need to first get more members and then get the checklist review committee going again. And then we can move on to having a bunch of different agenda items, especially the finance and legislative issues and local issues. I have a question for you. I was looking at PDAs and how they're developed. I'd like to see get a little more education on PDA development. And also, something that caught my eye was the PCA, and that's the conservation area. I've noticed, and I've been to a whole lot of different cities, and even in Oakland, they have parks on top of buildings. There are neighborhood farming projects. For example, I can't remember the name of the youth group that farms out in the Brentwood area, Knightson. Anyways, they helped Oakley Community Gardens get going, and they have a gorgeous little community garden at the end of a park, and it's perfect. And I was wondering if urban greening would qualify, if that would qualify under urban greening, and money could be set aside or sent or given to the city to help develop those areas. So in community benefit agreements, the cities can only ask developers for $50,000 in contributions for things like that. And I don't think that's quite enough, but if we could get some of that Measure J money to go along with that, to help fill in the empty spaces and green the place up. You look at Oakley, it's pretty dry and not many trees, so I would like to see something like that. And would community gardens like that qualify?
I mean, it's currently not in the measure, so it'd be a little difficult, but, you know, there's other avenues you can go through. You know, we can apply for grants. There's lots of different things.
I'll work it.
Yeah.
And yet it's called.
Has nothing to do with there being any oak trees there. They were almond trees, so Anything else?
Like I said, this item we will come back to you with, you know, maybe a little more fleshed out, but there's a ongoing conversation we can have, but a lot of things we can start immediately, like the types of presentations and getting you guys, hooked up with your local staffs, giving presentations. So if there's any of these things you saw today that you'd like to do, like you have an idea you want to present at our next meeting, let us know. That is fully within your purview to do things like that.
I would like to, I mean, we don't have a quorum, so we can't make a motion, but I need for us to look at our bylaws. They were put together in 2006, and there are a few items on the bylaws that I would like for us to review. So perhaps maybe I can write to you, Matt, what my thoughts are and copy Michael?
Sure.
Okay.
Everybody has a copy of the bylaws.
Right, yeah,
Right here.
I know that we get the agendas for our meetings, but it would be possible to just include us on the email distribution list for the full CCTA board meeting, so we can just be able to just, go in and look electronically at the agendas, which might motivate us to attend?
Yeah,
I'm curious.
I mean, we could add everyone. I don't know if everyone's interested, but you can certainly add yourself. What would you prefer? I mean,
I'd like to see it pushed out to all of us, frankly.
Right.
Because that might encourage us to, take the time and just take at least a quick glance.
It's
at the full
available.
agenda.
It's
I know
available
it's
online.
available, but I mean, sometimes I don't go to it. I will pay more attention to things that come to me. I'm not asking for hard copy, just.
No.
Just the,
And when you do go up and sign yourself up, you can say, do you just want agenda? Do you want a full packet? This or that. But I'm just hesitant to sign everybody up without asking them. But maybe we can mention that when we have a full quorum. And but in the meantime, I would certainly say go to ccta.net and go to meetings and opt in. And I think that's a good idea, at least for the authority that people would be aware.
And I would like a copy of your presentation, please. If you would send that to me, thanks.
And that takes us to reports. Mr. Smith.
Well, I have to apologize. I was just in mental overload. I wrote the report and I forgot to send it. They tell me the staff was wondering what happened.
He's like clockwork.
Yeah, well,
One of the hands.
yeah, that's about it this month. I'll include it in the report for next time. That being said, there wasn't a great deal of business. So I just mentioned a couple of things. We talked about being interested in legislative matters. In general, depending on the importance in that particular month, there is either a major discussion or a regular agenda item on the legislative update, or it is embedded in the consent calendar. So if you get a copy of the packet and run a search on legislative, you'll probably find it. It was discussed as a regular agenda item. And just a couple of highlights. One, the whole federal tax bill does not, or at least did not at the time the report was given, which was the third Wednesday of last month, did not include the Federal Highway Task Fund. Another issue of great concern to groups like the Transportation Authority was whether there was going to be a change in treatment of municipal bonds, and that did not change. And they're also working on autonomous vehicle rule changes are being considered at the federal level. So I think that really is probably the most substantive discussion that took place at that meeting. In general, what I do is I do get a notification when the agenda is available on the website, and I try to go through it before the meeting, and especially to do my paragraph on consent items, and kind of have a framework of the report before I go in to the meeting. And so I just have to update it with discussions and votes. Anyway, I'm sorry, I just went blank on this particular area this month.
Any other reports, comments?
I have a comment. Don Tatson, who sits on the authority, is mayor of Lafayette again. So he was sworn in Monday evening. I did not have a chance to attend the city council meeting for that, but he's mayor again. Also, I have a comment on our attendance report. We need to look at our committee's members' attendance. There is something in the bylaws regarding four absences, sorry. And so I think that we need to contact the member and see if they're interested in returning. They may or may not be. And if we could put in on the absences an emergency absence, because I was absent last month. My family is in Puerto Rico, and my island is destroyed. So I needed to be with my family and not here. So we might want to consider, rather than an excused absence, maybe an emergency absence would be somebody's in the hospital falling under that, and that would excuse the person. Also, the discussion history, there's two topics that are missing. One was a topic from Grace Craigan, BART General Manager. She was not able to attend. One of the Board of Directors came and gave a presentation, and I can't remember the date on that. And then there was another presentation, BART History, which was Mike Keeley, and I can't remember the date on that either. Sorry. And so that's missing from the history.
Julie, the history of BART, that was June 26th, 2016. It is included.
It is? Mike Keeley? Oh, good. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Okay. And then on a personal note, my oldest son is going to be recognized by De La Salle High School. He and another alum, both fallen heroes, Captain Captain Hassett was killed in Iraq, and Jonathan, as you very well might remember, was killed in Afghanistan. And so De La Salle High School will now recognize both boys at a ceremony at De La Salle January 9th at 4 o'clock. It's a very small ceremony. There's no hoopla. It's about 45 minutes. And I'll unveil the memorial monument. There have been 5 other high schools in Contra Costa County who have recognized their fallen heroes. And De La Salle had said no, they would not do it, and they finally acquiesced. So that's going to happen January 9th. If you're in the area, I'd love to see you.
Were they part of the Run Across America?
Routes Across America. Routes Across America is happening this Saturday. I'm receiving maybe 200 wreaths that I'll be laying at the different, at Oakland Cemetery where my son is buried, and then Queen of Heaven, where there are 5 fallen heroes, Gold Star families. And then what I do is I lay wreaths at the pillars in Rana Creek, at the police station, the service pillars there, and there are memorial plaques on the ground for fallen World War II heroes and some police that have been killed in action. Then I go to the crosses in Lafayette, and there's a cross there for the 5 Gold Star families in my group. I take wreaths to the Veterans Memorial in Lafayette, and then to the Veteran Services in Martinez, and to the Vet Center in Concord. So that's about 200 más o menos. And I'll be doing that Monday, Tuesday of next week. That's it.
Okay. What are we on to? Future agenda items. I think we got some.
Chair, could we go back to staff comments?
Sure.
And let's see, I think, well, as far as future agenda items, I think we got most of the ones you mentioned, but if there's any more, we'll go back to that. So staff comments. Bad news first. Well, it's not bad news. Unless you want Miss Jahan over here to relentlessly hound you and track you down, please take the online ethics training course. She will be so happy when everybody has completed that. It is required, so we really need you to go ahead and complete that if you haven't yet. You can contact either of us if you have questions about it. The better news now, at least I think it's good news, we did get you guys a tour of the new eBART station in Antioch, the Hillcrest station. It is scheduled for, unfortunately it has to be during the day because Director Keller needs to be there and BART staff has to be there and CCTA staff. But it's the day of the January meeting, that would be a January meeting, so the 24th of January at 10 a.m. in Antioch. I do apologize to those of you who are, employed and can't get out of it, but I would encourage you to take the morning off, take a sick day, do whatever you can, because it's really cool. The maintenance facility is incredible. The trains are super cool. They'll give you a nice show out there.
Will Rick Rattray be there?
I'm not sure if Rick will be there, but Director Keller will definitely be there, and the head of the whole facility out there is a former Capitol Corridor employee who's Lindsay knows very well. I met him yesterday. I forget his name, but he does a good tour. So so we'll send out, Fifi will send out some sort of formal invitation to you guys in the next few days, but get it on your calendar, January 24th, Wednesday at 10 a.m., and it's worthwhile.
Just to be clear, it doesn't count as a meeting.
It does not count as a
Okay,
meeting. It just happened to
so
fall
people
on
don't
that.
get crazy and go, oh my gosh, I have to take the day off, otherwise it's counted as an
No,
absence.
no, you won't. It's purely a optional field trip, extracurricular activity. That's what it is. That's what it is.
It's the entry ticket. She doesn't look at me when she says that.
But and we're working on Gomentum next. But eBart, since it's opening in a few months, I think this will be one of the last chances you'll get to see it before, the train doesn't have that new train smell anymore.
We need to do Warm Springs Extension. I know it's not Contra Costa County, but it goes through Contra Costa County. Do Warm Springs. It's beautiful. Very nice station. Just saying.
That's all I have.
Anything else?
So if you want to know what's happening in Lafayette, Moraga, Orinda, you can pick up the Morinda News Weekly, and it's got all information about everything you never wanted to know about anybody. And there it is. It's got everything about what's happening. And they break it down into what's going on in Orinda, and then the section for Moraga, and then the section for Lafayette. It's rather cool weekly that comes out on Wednesdays.
Okay. Future agenda items, it looks like we've got issues on finance and legislative issues and then local issues, and maybe even some informational on PDA and PCA development and how it's done. Yeah, that's on there. That's a big one.
Yep.
Other than that, I think we're done. Anybody else got anything? We're done.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas. I did that lightly.
Thank you.
Sorry. I'm just heavy-handed. And look, I busted a brand-new toilet this week, so I got to go buy another one.
With the gavel?
No, but it was with something close to a hammer. And it was a dummy mistake, so. Mama wants me to save money by remodeling myself.